Massachusetts. So we will go ahead and kick off. Welcome everyone to our CAST-free webinar, UDL and Career Preparation Programs. I'm your host, Allison Posey, and I'm thrilled to be with you here today. While we often think of UDL in K-12 classrooms or in the development of curricula, UDL can be a powerful tool to support development of career preparation programs to make them more inclusive. The National Science Foundation funded AccessATE, or the Advanced Technological Education Project, to partner with CAST to provide guidance for community college educators to incorporate UDL principles and accessibility into their grant-funded work. The goal is to build the capacity of the STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, the technician workforce to reach all learners. We're so happy you all are joining us in this panel discussion today. We have featured Rachael Bower from AccessATE, Dan Larochelle from Manchester Community College, Luis Pérez and Allison Driscoll from CAST. They will share case studies of how advanced technical education instructors incorporate UDL into their courses and activities. They'll highlight the lessons learned and tips for others who want to follow a similar journey. And before we begin, I want to share with you some of our accessibility commitments. There's alt text on all images, closed captions for videos, a digital handout with logistical structure and descriptive links, and everything has been checked for accessibility. This is the link to the digital handout that includes all of the resources or links that we will share with you today. It's bit.ly/access with a capital A, capital ATE, and then webinar with a capital W. So bit.ly/AccessATE webinar. We also, as usual with our CAST-free webinars, hope this is conversational with you. So if you're joining with us live today, as many of you have already began, please open the chat panel from the center of the bottom of your Zoom window, and you can choose everyone from the drop-down above where you type. So please feel free to post questions, ideas, reflections at any point during the discussion. In fact, if you want to post something right now, if you have a burning question, feel free to post and we'll either answer it right away or weave that question into our discussion today. And if you're joining us watching the recording at a later date, welcome. You can also participate with us and you can use Twitter. In fact, anyone today can use Twitter. Just use the hashtag CASTPL, all capitals, and the @cast_UDL, and that's all in capitalization. So with those logistics taken care of, it is now my honor to do the fun stuff, and that is to introduce our panel for today. And you'll get to learn more about them as they share, and you can review a more complete bio of them on our digital handout. So I want to welcome Luis Pérez, CAST TA Specialist. Luis, hello.
Hello, everybody. Really excited to be with you this afternoon and to share some of the work that we've done on career preparation programs.
And we have Rachael Bower, the PI and Director of AccessATE.
Hi, everyone. Hi, great to be here. I'm excited to interact with you guys and sort of explain a little bit more about the project and about the AT program too.
Fabulous. We have Allison Driscoll, CAST Associate Project Director. Hi, Allison.
Hi. Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here. I'm looking forward to chatting with you all today.
And we have Dan Larochelle, who's a professor at Manchester Community College. Hi, Dan.
How's it going? Thanks for having me. I think it's going to be very eye-opening, some of the tools that you have for higher education.
Fabulous. And we just want to get a quick lay of the land. And if you could let us know in the chat, if you are you can just put A in the chat, a K-12 educator. Oh, some of you are jumping ahead of me already. B, a K-12 CTE, a career and technical educator. C, a community college educator. D, a four-year college educator. E, an administrator in any of the above. Or F, other. Please let us know if we didn't cover your role. We would like to know what you do, and that'll help us to make sure that we're gearing the conversation towards areas that you might be interested in. And as we're seeing, there's variability.
Yes, there's a lot. It's really nice. We have a really nice mix.
It's great. And yes, if you could let us know if you clicked F, what your other is. We see evaluator in here, a consultant, instructional designer, regional education coach and consultant. member of Governor's Workforce Council, State Board of Ed, private college educator with certificates 2 and 4-year programs, digital, look at how many we didn't catch, digital accessibility analyst,
Oh, there's
New
David.
Hampshire UDL ed consultant, an ID specialist at a career college, student advocate, AT program director.
Great to see this variability in the different roles that are represented, because we all have a role to play, and including all kinds of learners, and in making sure that accessibility is part of the consideration. So great to have you all represented here.
So I'll go ahead and turn it over to you, Luis.
So we are going to watch a video that we recently produced, and this is just going to give you a summary of the work that we've done in coordination with AccessATE and with Rachel's project. So without further delay, let's go ahead and roll the video. You might recognize the voice as well.
Individuals with disabilities are underrepresented in the STEM technician workforce, but community colleges are trying to change this by coming up with innovative ways to broaden participation in STEM education. One approach that has proven effective is Universal Design for Learning, which is a research-based framework that takes into account differences in how people learn. Universal Design for Learning has proven effective in designing learning environments that better include individuals with disabilities and many other underserved learners. In collaboration with AccessATE, CAST partnered with community colleges across the country to see what impact Universal Design for Learning can have on learners in higher education. Using the expertise CAST has in bringing UDL to professional development, to curriculum design, and career guidance, we introduce UDL to various faculty from across the country and make case studies of the process. We work to improve virtual presentations for community colleges, facilitate knowledge sharing in micro and nanotechnology programs, bring UDL support to bilingual conferences in classrooms, and to create career guidance materials for the biofabrication industry.
By making things more accessible and by using the more of a UDL format for things, it actually is helping me to be better organized so I can help my students be better organized.
I learned a lot in a short time that I had to go back to my talk and change and simplify the slides.
In my future presentation, when I want to make a seminar, I will try to include all those tips in my seminar. Also, in my courses, I've already been using some of the tips.
The more accessible you make your materials, the greater the reach of your materials, the bigger the impact you can make with them.
Take a look at the UDL case studies that CAST designed with educators to get a better idea of some of the possibilities for implementing Universal Design for Learning in higher education. Visit accessate.net to learn more.
All right, well, I think I will stick to accessibility rather than voiceover work for my career, but thank you, Mindy. Mindy has dropped the link to this video, so if you want to go back and review it, we just wanted to share a video that captured the totality of the work and gave you an overview of the many different areas that we addressed as we engage in this work. Everything ranging from making presentations more accessible, to making the curriculum materials more accessible, to a bilingual conference that included American Sign Language. So a range of different aspects that we covered as part of this work. And I will turn it back over to you.
All right, so great to see all of you here today. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the program under which this work is funded. That's the National Science Foundation's Advanced Technological Education, better known as ATE, to those of us in the community. And it's a funding stream from the National Science Foundation. And it really is unusual in that it's NSF's commitment to 2-year institutions and to workforce. Most of the National Science Foundation really focuses on colleges and universities, 4-year programs. But this really focuses on applied STEM and particularly on program development or program improvement. So a two-year institution might see a need with local industry for solar, and they maybe they had a course in solar, but they didn't have an entire degree program, they might approach NSF and look for funding to do a solar program, or they may want to improve some aspect of a current program, right? So there are multiple ways that you can get funding, professional development, curriculum development, multiple deliverables that you can get funded to do the work that you need at your own institution. And one of the things that's nice is you can engage students from seventh grade on. So hopefully you can get to those students at an earlier age. There are a lot of partnerships with K-12, high school, obviously other higher education organizations as well, but it is nice that you can get funding to start in seventh grade. Big focus on industry partnerships. Obviously, these are workforce focused programs, so understanding the need of local, regional, national industry is really important. There are almost 400 projects and centers funded nationwide at the moment, and they include a set of kind of cross-cutting projects that help support grantees and the work that they're doing. All right, so one of these cross-cutting projects is AccessATE, and really came about from needs that we were seeing in the community and discussions with community members about the fact that, while many community colleges have a disability service center, a disability student services center on their campus, for many of them, they are extremely understaffed, particularly at the moment, I must say. And a lot of the faculty found themselves in positions where they were trying to understand how to make things more accessible themselves and struggling a little bit with that, as well as how to talk to their industry partners about that. Because for many of them, they bridge that gap from the educational environment into the workforce environment. And so they ended up having conversations with industry partners and employers about accessibility and felt a bit unprepared for those conversations in some cases, right? So fundamentally, AccessATE works with a set of partners, including CAST, and support the grantees that are funded by ATE around accessibility issues, although all the materials that we create are free for anyone to use. So all of you who are on the call today, whether or not you're directly involved with ATE, are free to use all of the materials on AccessATE. And we have things like tip sheets and a collection of resources. And we also have the case studies that we're going to be talking about today.
Fabulous. And I'll just pause and see if there are any questions that anyone may have about AccessATE or that NSF funding stream that Rachel mentioned.
All right. So I just wanted to tell you a little bit too about the fact that we're going to have a follow-up, what we call an AT office hours, which is a Zoom meeting as opposed to a Zoom webinar. So we're in a webinar now, we can't see your smiling faces, but on the 17th at 2 p.m., we will hopefully be able to see many of your smiling faces. And we're going to, I think Mindy's going to pop the registration link for that into chat. We'll have it a couple of times. And we'll be following up with you in email so that you can register. It's a little bit more informal. It's a chance for you to ask questions of us directly and share your stories and talk a little bit more about some of the issues that we're going to raise today and specifically the case studies, but also just general UDL questions or whatever you'd like to talk about. All right, so hopefully we'll see you there.
And Sally has a question. Thank you, Sally. What is the schedule for NSF funding?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I didn't see that. Yeah, the grants are due in October. So it's a really good time, actually. If you're interested, you have time to get a proposal in. It just, for full transparency, they do like to see most of the proposals coming from two-year institutions. Not that you can't partner with a four-year institution, you certainly can, but they look much more favorably on projects and centers coming out of community colleges.
Great, thank you. And thank you for that question. Keep popping them in the chat. That's perfect. Do they only fund American institutions?
Yes.
Okay.
National Science Foundation is
Can the institution have 4-year programs while most are 2-year programs?
Oh yeah. Yeah. If you, I know a lot of community colleges now offer a 4-year, have some 4-year component too. Yeah, that's fine.
And did you see there's one more? What about adult education?
Wow. That's a great question for a program officer. I'm not sure about that. I don't know. You stumped me. I've been around AT for like 20 years. I've never gotten that question. You can email me and I'll try to find out for you afterwards.
Great, great. And Carlos, we see that you have a question and we'll get to the case studies more in just a moment. So hang on to that question and we'll get back to you. I'm going to turn it over to Allison here, who will share a little bit about an overview of some of the types of case studies.
Oh, thank you, Allison. So for the past couple of years, CAST has been collaborating with ATE to create a set of case studies. So to get started, we identified areas of our work in career and technical education and workforce development with 2- and 4-year colleges that dovetail really nicely with the goals of ATE, largely around broadening participation and access to technician education and careers. So our role in the AccessATE grant was to develop case stories with embedded videos to showcase UDL and accessibility best practices applied in those settings. So to just give you a quick idea about what some of those case studies cover, one of the ones I wrote documents how UDL was used in the design and creation of a bilingual professional development conference. So those 2 languages were English and American Sign Language. So as you can imagine, there was a lot of pre-planning and considerations around folks' preferred communication modes and how to support all learners and participants in engaging fully in the conference proceedings. And then in the same vein, we have another case where we interviewed Dr. Sandy Conley, who teaches biology, intro-level biology, largely for non-majors in lecture halls at Rochester Institute of Technology, which is also home to the National Technical Institute for the Deaf. So in a typical lecture, she would have a combination of hearing students and deaf and hard of hearing students. So she has sign language interpreters that work with her, and a lot of them have an instructional design background as well. So in this case study, Dr. Connolly shares a number of strategies that she's developed in the past 15 years, teaching large lecture courses for students with a range of preferred communication modes. And she really, highlights and calls out a number of universal design for learning strategies that she relies on. She often uses case-based learning to support the engagement of non-science majors into these really, complicated and, deeply scientific biology concepts. And so I really encourage you to take a look at that one. She's also pretty funny. So she's a great advocate for UDL in higher ed. And I think next, Luis and Dan will share a little bit more in depth about some of the other cases.
Great. And Carlos, thank you for noting that you had an RU in collaboration with NTID. And I'm going to ask what those acronyms stand for. If you wouldn't mind putting those in the chat, it does start to feel like alphabet soup. But thank you for, again, making connections to the work that you're doing and connecting to the projects that we're thinking of here. All right, Luis, so I'm going to let you share your screen here.
Still hear me? I'm not at my home base. Are you able to hear me okay, Allison?
Yes, there you are.
All right, perfect. So give me 1 second while I share my screen. And of course, we want you all to know where you can find these case studies. So there is a page that lists all of the case studies in one place. If you go to accessate.net and then / I think actually I had, give me 1 second. Should be case studies at the end there. Let's move the Zoom window here. I promise there is.
You can go right under features too and grab it from there.
Oh, there we go. Thank you, Rachel. So there is this page, it lists all of the case studies, and you'll see the different institutions, the different programs that we worked with. We have their nice logos there. And I'm gonna focus on one of these case studies, which is related to robotics or robotics course. So we partner with the Borough of Manhattan Community College and Dr. Mohammed Azhar and the computer science department there. And what's nice about this case study is that, first of all, when we started this, it came out of a conference presentation that Rachel and a number of us from CAST did at an annual gathering of the ATE community, the ATE Principal Investigators Conference. And Dr. Mohammed Azhar was in the audience, and he really became interested in how can I make my curriculum more accessible, not only for the students that I have in my computer science department, but also the students that we do outreach to. Because as Rachel mentioned, it's really important to reach out beyond just the 2-year college, the 4-year college, but really start to build that pipeline. And so we can reach out to high school, or as she mentioned, starting in 7th grade. So this project Dr. Mohammed Azhar had put together really does that. It reaches beyond just higher education and into K-12 to really start building that pipeline and recruiting students. So I'm just going to give you a quick overview of this case study because it'll give you a sense for how we built each of these. So the case study is accessibility in a robotics course. Dr. Azhar uses the Lego robotics system to teach basic computer science concepts, again, to K-12 students in schools that have a number of underrepresented communities in not just computer science, but in STEM fields. So he's using this robotics curriculum as a way to hook students into this area of advanced technological education, STEM in general, in computer science as well. So with each of these case studies, just like the video that we shared with you earlier, there will be a video where we've interviewed faculty member, we've interviewed other staff, we interviewed students to get their perspectives as to what they learned, what they took away from the case study. So I'll just play the beginning of this one here, and all of these videos have closed captions so that we're trying to model the accessibility that we're discussing in these case studies.
The audio's off.
Accessibility in a robotics course.
No worries. That's why we often have captions, right? So again, you can check out the video yourself if you go to the page for those case studies. I won't bother resharing my screen, but just know that they have captions as well. So you can follow along with the captions. So for this specific case study, what we did is Dr. Azhar wanted to review his curriculum and revise it to include accessibility best practices. Another thing that I really love about this case study is how he involved his students in the work. In fact, I would say his students did most of the work. And that's really commendable because they picked up some really valuable skills so that if they continue on in a career in computer science, they're going to be part of the solution, right? In the future, they're going to be part of the next generation of people that are creating accessible solutions. So I met with the students and I provided a 1-hour webinar type presentation focusing on the 4 core principles of accessibility: perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust, that together make up that acronym POUR, that are the basic principles of accessibility behind the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. And then we identified a few areas where we could get started, right? We can't tackle everything at once, but we identified a few areas where we could focus. So things like making sure that the images had alternative text that was descriptive, making sure that the documents that were part of the curriculum had a good solid structure so that they could be easy to navigate with assistive technology. Looking at the tables, so tables were used quite a bit throughout the curriculum. So making sure that those tables were structured in a way that assistive technology could provide the information and audio in a way that made sense. So for each of those practices, we engage in a series of iterative cycles where the students would share a document that they were working on, and then I would provide some feedback, and then they would go back and make some revisions, and we went back and forth. And because this was at the beginning of the pandemic, this was all done remotely, and it was all done using Google Docs. And so we got to practice some of the accessibility of Google Docs as well, and some of the accessibility of Zoom, because we were trying to figure out Zoom at that time and how to record over Zoom as well. So it was a great learning experience about how to support a range of different students. And again, we're not just focusing on the students at the two-year community college, but helping them do that outreach work in an accessible way so that they can bring in new voices into computer science and into STEM. So in addition to what we learned through the case study, for each of those items that we focused on, we have resources either from CAST or from other great partners that we worked with that we're sharing as part of the case study. And so each case study is going to follow a very similar pattern. An overview video, what we focused on. We often collected data as well. So we conducted some surveys, some interviews, some focus groups. So we share the results of that process so that you can see, in the spirit of transparency about our process, we've shared that with you as well. So this is just one of those case studies. Like Allison said earlier, there are a number of them. So I invite you to go to that webpage, accessate.net/case studies. Or you can just access it through the top navigation. If you go to features, case studies, that will take you there as well. And with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Allison.
Luis, there's a quick question. Is there a guide to using the case studies? Now, this question came before you just shared all that's available there on the website, but I just wanted to ask it to make sure we were covered.
We just launched these case studies not too long ago, but that is a great idea. So really appreciate that feedback. That's something that we could definitely look into. But also at the end of this webinar, stay tuned. See how I'm doing that? I'm priming you for the end of this webinar. We are going to share some really exciting news coming from CAST where these case studies might be incorporated.
And there was even a comment that said, I would love to be involved in one of the case studies. So yes, let's keep connecting.
Yeah.
Let's
Absolutely.
This is ongoing.
I was also going to remind everybody too, that this is all freely available. This is, this is funded by the National Science Foundation. It's free for you to use and reuse and play around with. So we want you to make use of it. And we would love to hear about how you're making use of it, obviously.
Remix it.
Like the old double cassette tapes that we used to have back in the day. Great. Well, with that, then Dan, let's move on and learn about a second case example, developing a UDL mindset.
Okay. I currently have an NSF-ATE grant. It's improving mechatronics education for technicians. And mechatronics is a weird word. It's a mechanical electrical system you program to control a process. Okay. Sounds very complicated, but as we learn through some of the UDL trainings, breaking down those complex processes into simple little pieces and then building systems from them is actually what my whole program at the college is about. So we do 3D printers, robotics, all sorts of things. And these mechatronic skill sets can go across several different areas like agriculture, telecommunications. There's a lot of neat things where these skills can be used. Can you go to the next slide?
Yes.
So one of the things that surprised me the most is when I originally thought about UDL, I thought about it being from K to 12. And when we went through the training, I was pleasantly surprised that there's a whole UDL on campus website. And it has all these resources that kind of, things that we've been looking for and things that we just kind of did on our own. And it kind of has some tips and tricks on how to use screen readers and how to, make your course objectives really clear. We found that one page that's up there now, the UDL syllabus, is really kind of making sure that all the content on your syllabus is accessible. The expectations that you have are clear for the students, and basically how do you change your assessment methods so you can assess people in different ways for different students? Okay, so there's a lot of neat things that came from those tools. You can go to the next page. So one of the things that we kind of stumbled upon is when we were going through the training. Actually, let me take one step back. My involvement with CAS was through Amanda Bastoni. I'd worked on a project with her called Robot Algebra, and she now works for CAS. And she was one of the ones that had kind of recruited us to do this specific workshop. And we had a couple sessions with me and all of the advanced manufacturing faculty at Manchester Community College. And we were able to dissect some of our labs, and one session was dissecting our syllabus. As we were dissecting one of our labs, we found that, some of the tools that we were using to deliver our content, specifically Tooling U, they had a whole bunch of other accessibility tools that we really didn't know that even existed before. So this kind of, the training was neat because it was over a couple different sessions. So in between sessions, you got to learn a little bit more and then ask more questions the next session. And Luis was very patient with us. But again, you're kind of constantly building, and what about this? So inside of Tooling U, that's designed by the Society of Manufacturing Engineers, we found that you could turn on and off different features of the delivery tool for one student, one class, one section of a class. And that was very powerful for some of the students that really needed that. We had one specific student that would be looking at the screen, and he would be writing down everything on the screen. Because that's how he took notes. That's how he was trained in high school to take notes. So there's a feature, print slides, and then he can print the slides and then take notes on those. So that one little trick really kind of saved that student a whole bunch of time when he was trying to digest the content. So instead of trying to write it all down, he was able to kind of take a step back, and it kind of eased him up a little bit. One of the things that we do very well when we teach robotics is in automation. We have to break things down into smaller pieces. We also found when we were going through one of the activities is we found that if we broke down the deliverables inside that project into smaller bite-sized pieces and stretch them over a period of time, the students were more successful. Okay. And when our program started, it was really based on an engineering program, like a pre-engineering program, right? So a lot of our students go on into engineering technician career paths. But so like every engineering problem, you had this overarching goal and you had an open-ended problem set and you said, here you go. And a lot of our really top level students took it and ran. Other students just sat there and like, what's the next step? And some of the techniques that we learned in our UDL training really helped us, get set points for people to come in, learn understand what's due at this point, what's due at this point, and what's due at this point. That also got us to reorganize a lot of our materials in our Canvas page. And again, breaking down things so it's easier. We also developed a bunch of 1 to 2 minute videos that broke down. We found that we were repeating ourselves over and over and over again. How do you square a block? How do you touch off a tool? If we take a couple, short period of time and put together a 1 or 2 minute video, I don't have to explain that to every person in the class. But there's going to be some people that are going to watch that video 1 time, and some people that are going to watch that video 10 times. So that small little piece of work allowed us to, make some of that stuff more accessible. So, in a nutshell, the case study really helped us open our eyes. As a department, we got to share our different strategies that we've been just naturally using, and then put like a UDL lens on it. And I thought that was really a really powerful thing. I also think that, the UDL, when you first look at it, it seems like this big thing. And it's really not. It's something that you can grab little pieces of, try here and there, see what works, and just like a good engineer, do it again. Again, it was a very good experience from my faculty and me, and I would really look into the UDL on campus resources, because they were very beneficial to us.
And Dan, can I ask a question that we get sometimes? And I'm interested to hear your thinking on this, because do you think UDL at all lowered the rigor? We'll sometimes hear, especially when we get to, fields of engineering and STEM, and I have a biology background, that we don't want to lower the rigor. What's your opinion on how UDL aligns with supporting rigor? Did you feel like it was lowering it?
No, it definitely doesn't lower the rigor. If anything, it helps make things a little bit more clear. Unfortunately, back in old school engineering, you did things one way, and that's not the case anymore. Like, I don't have to memorize everything. I don't have, there's so many tools out there that I can use to solve a problem, that I think just teaching students how to solve problems and to be, have a growth mindset is important. It definitely doesn't reduce the rigor. If anything, it makes things a little bit more clear of expectations of what we want that rigor to be and what levels. And if you can break down those levels of, to get an A, to get an A, you have to reach this point and then this point. I think that's how, those are some opportunities to use UDL to make the rigor better.
That's so helpful. And even by having those clear expectations, I better understand how there can be flexibility then to get there. So when you were thinking about flexible assessments, it wasn't that you then had to create a whole, dozens of different assessments. You knew your criteria, you knew what folks were going for, and then there could be flexible ways to get them there. So thank you for taking on that question that often stumps people. And I do invite folks to ask any questions here in the chat for Dan, specifically, from the case example that he was just sharing about.
And this is Luis, if I may make another comment too, is another sort of pattern that evolved with many of these case studies is that the process was very, very iterative. So in other words, we didn't just have one meeting and then went off and kind of, attempted to apply UDL principles or accessibility best practices. In most of these case studies, we had an initial meeting, and then I don't like to use the word homework, but you had a task that would then help you apply what you learned, and then also help you formulate some questions for the next session. Because sometimes it's only when you get out there and you look at the tools, like in your case, Dan, right? And you start exploring those tools, that's when you identify, oh, I have a question. And then the next time that we met, we would kind of pick up with those questions. And so for many of these case studies, we met a number of times. And it was over time that we really developed those skills, right? By putting them into practice and trying things out. So almost taking that engineering mindset that you mentioned, Dan, of you try it out, you get some feedback, and then you go back and make revisions and try again.
And I appreciate that, Luis. You don't have to do it alone. I mean, really leverage that shared expertise and the process together, because UDL will come to life in different ways based on those resources, based on the learners you have, the challenges you have. Go ahead, Dan. I'm sorry if I jumped ahead of you there.
No, you're good. I think there's a question.
So there's a comment. What I commonly observe in my kids' school is some teachers consider making things complicated, that's what's adding the rigor. But actually, in referencing, Dan, what you were sharing, that this is a better approach, that UDL aims to make things more clear and doesn't decrease the rigor. I think that's very well said, and often can be like a hidden objective, a hidden curriculum that, kids may be guessing to try to figure out.
Well, I would also posit that depending on how you think about it, that by increasing the ability of more students to participate more fully and deeply, that you increase the rigor in the sense that you allow more people to explore the problem in different ways, and you encourage that sort of creative exploration by talking openly and providing pathways to do that, which I think ultimately that's what diversity does for us in a classroom setting, right? I mean, I think that, I think it's true that it not only doesn't decrease the rigor I don't mind the word rigor, but I think people hear it and they're like, oh my God, that means it's, terribly difficult or something. And I feel like it's, how you define rigor is part of what makes it interesting, right? And what you value, because in talking to industry, and of course, I think Dan would probably echo this, that in talking to industry, while they definitely value those, the STEM learning from the students, they also really value a bunch of other things too, that we sometimes call soft skills or whatever. I don't know what, it seems to change sometimes from year to year, what we call that grouping of skills, right? And I think that's another thing that UDL supports so well, is helping students with not just the hard science skills, but the softer skills of communication and working in teams and all of those things too, which I think industry are desperate to find in their employees.
So well said. And it actually ties to a connection here, or a question here from Alicia. How frequently are STEM faculty willing to explore and implement alternate forms of assessment? I mean, I'm even thinking about communication is an important piece that we might need to assess, or that's important for industry. She's saying that the majority at her institution are pretty wedded to traditional exams. So I don't know if any of you want to tackle the assessment question.
I know I do a lot of project-based learning. So we actually physically do things. You know what I mean? Again, we're very technician oriented. My technicians aren't going out there telling people what they do, they're actually doing it. So a lot of our assessments are hands-on assessments, where they're actually wiring a circuit board, wiring a PLC, programming a robot. You know what I mean? So a lot of the assessments to that just have to be a little more creative as to like, okay, take a video of you doing, programming a robot. Again, the students that we have right now have a very, very different learning pattern than we all grew up with. And that's one of the bigger problems. We all learned out of books. These kids have so many resources available to them, and we're not letting them use them to actually learn. We're pushing them back into a book. And that's, almost all my classes in my program are hybrid. And it has to be, we're teaching kids how to be problem solvers, how to work in teams. The biggest one for me is a good work ethic. Yeah, my classes are rigorous because there's a lot of work. It's not that it's hard. And the concept of breaking very fundamental things, if you look at, programming a CNC machine, it's plotting points. You did that in 5th grade. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to program a CNC machine. But if you watch the CNC machine running, it looks pretty impressive. So that's my 2 cents.
Well, I think you raise an important point there, Dan, and that is that you're providing access to students who maybe don't have a background in the skills, or maybe come at the skills with a different background. So you're providing these on-ramps to make sure they're able to get to, and it's funny, Rachel, I keep using the word rigor, but the level of expertise that you hope for and that you need in the industry. And do you find resistance? Go ahead.
Comment. This is Luis. So I think you've mentioned the idea of a constructive struggle, right? So it's not that these subjects are not difficult, but we want to find the right difficulty. So the difficulty.
Productive struggle. I'm not sure if that came through. Let me just emphasize that productive struggle.
productive struggle, right? So if we address some of the difficulties that are just related to the mechanics of how you find and access information, then we do free up some of those resources that learners have in limited supply so that they can focus their learning on some deeper thinking, or as Dan said, on applying those skills in different ways. So I think definitely we can call it different things, but there's different ways that we can focus on really focusing on that deeper thinking that is essential for us to be able to solve some of these significant challenges where it might be Dan's future ATE technicians that are going to solve some of those challenges for us. So I think it's that's the way, one way to think about it.
What do you recommend when you get resistance among other faculty around UDL or this approach? Do you have any recommendations?
I can start it and then I'll let Dan add from his perspective, but I think just starting small. So, that's what we did in Dr. Azar's class. And of course, we were working with students, but the same thing applies to faculty. Select 2 or 3 things that you can really practice and kind of become more confident in. Build that muscle, basically. It's like working out. You start out with a few things. You don't want to overwhelm your body all at once. And then over time, you bring in additional techniques that you can master. But I think that's the key, is to start small. And we have an acronym that we've created, SLIDE, for creating accessible documents. So something like that, that's simple, memorable. It's something that you can start with, just a few things, and then over time build up your repertoire. So Dan, what would you add?
Again, starting off small, but again, almost all educators, are really in it to teach their students, right? So adding more skills to their bag of tricks only can help. Okay. And I think, just creating awareness of what these are. Again, when you look at some of the whole UDL program, it's intense. It looks like it's a lot of work, but developing good habits when you're creating curriculum is really important, that you have a very wide lens when you're developing it, so that those things are, so the next thing I write is now I have an accessibility lens on it that I didn't have before. So
I would say too, I agree with everything that's been said, but I would say the other thing too is that many good teachers and educators are doing huge components of this, whether they call it UDL, right? I mean, just the fact, Dan, that you were saying, you already do a lot of your assessment in a variety of ways, because that's what you have to do when you're teaching in a physical environment, and you might not have tagged that as UDL prior to doing this, and now you do. So, I mean, I think being encouraging to your faculty and saying, you guys already intuitively know a lot of this. We're trying to give you a framework that may be a little bit more formal, but the beauty of that is then you start seeing, ooh, I've been doing this and this, but I wasn't even thinking about this piece. So I can integrate that in at this semester. And then next semester, I can integrate something else. So I think helping them see that they're already probably doing a lot of this, or letting them feel that way, even if maybe they aren't quite doing as much, helps them feel good about the process, and not like this is something that's being layered on. Because I mean, every community college educator, every educator I know is completely overwhelmed right now. So anything that feels like, oh, now you have to do this whole new thing that we're forcing on you, that's never a good, if they are afraid of that, which I think educators sometimes are, coming at it in a different way can be very helpful, I think.
Very
I agree. We did, like, I found that I was doing most of this stuff. I just didn't know what it was called. And I also found that, these workshops that CAS put on were great because we did it as a group of people. And if you can do this training in a group of people and do applied exercises, I think that really helps ingrain what they're trying to show you and what some of those techniques are. So I think that doing it in groups, if you want to encourage other faculty, we have a lot of symposiums out there that we have to have, professional development. some videos or some very small things on UDL topics would be beneficial to most educators.
Well, as you're all indicating, UDL gives us a common language to go between different disciplines because we're talking about learning and trying to give access to learning. And this gives us a common language for that. And there was a comment here from Kirsten saying that they're introducing this in K-12, and part of our reflection as we share the UDL framework is really asking, what are you already doing? And then what's one thing you're close to doing? And that small shift can kind of be something that they encourage to develop as part of their regular practices, more intentional practices, perhaps. Fabulous. Thank you all for those questions and those comments, and we'll pause. And if you have any more, please feel free to put them in the chat or in the QA. Thank you for those. And we invite you to take next steps with us. There are those ATE office hours that Rachel discussed. You can visit the case studies, which Allison, Luis, and Dan highlighted. And you can explore the digital handout. We've really tried to craft a robust digital handout with resources that you can link to that we hope can deepen your own background and opportunities for your own next steps. Let's see, any other comments, panel, about any of these next steps that you want to mention?
Just encourage you to come. The AT office hours are fun. They're very informal, and because we can all see each other, it's in a meeting format. You can pop on and share your stories or ask questions of the group in a way that means, you can kind of go back and forth a little bit more. I mean, I love chat and I love the webinar format too, but the office hours are more like a meeting, and they're not recorded. So if you want to really complain about somebody, an administrator, you are welcome to do it. We don't record the office hours because we want people to freely share everything that they'd like to share.
Luis, I'll turn this to you here.
Well, just in closing, as a final thought, this was a quote that really stood out to me from one of the videos that we recorded to document our work on the case studies. But this educator, I think you saw it as part of the video, the more accessible you make your materials, the greater the reach of your materials, the greater the impact you can make with them. So we might begin with accessibility with one focus, but it really benefits everybody. Because as Dan mentioned, we make things clearer, we make them easier to understand, and everybody gains from that. So learning becomes more accessible, it becomes more inclusive. And going back to what we've talked about, that common language, Allison, you mentioned being so important. So we wanna have that common language across K-12. We wanna have that common language when students go into our 2-year programs. And then if they so decide, if they wanna go on to a 4-year program, we want them to have that common language. So faculty, staff, students, we all want to be kind of moving in the same direction of a world that's more accessible and more inclusive, because we will all benefit from that. Again, one of Dan's students is gonna create the new piece of equipment that solves our environmental challenges. I have no doubt. So that's really, the big dividend of universal design for learning and accessibility is that we create a more inclusive world for everybody.
I am all in. You always get me, Luis. I always end up choking up at your comments. And I do want to thank some of the comments from Dr. Muhammad Azhar, strongly recommending thinking UDL as you develop curriculum or more content. It made your curriculum better. So thank you for noting that and for your collaboration. And Allison, do you want to share a little bit on these opportunities?
Yeah, I just wanted to sort of reiterate that at CAST, we have an entire post-secondary and workforce development team, and we work with a number of different community and technical colleges, four-year institutions, apprenticeship programs, to implement UDL-based strategies like we've been talking about today and tools in their learning environments. And if you are interested in partnering with us or learning more about the work we do, you can check out our website, which is in the chat, through cast.org. And also you could reach out to postsecondary@cast.org. That's our email address for our division. And as Luis sort of alluded to earlier, we are actually launching a new hybrid course, primarily online, but with some Zoom sessions this summer. It's designed for higher ed faculty, instructional designers, and administrators. And you can see a little bit more about that on our website too.
Very exciting. I want to take the course. And Rachel, can you share a little bit about these?
Absolutely. So if you're interested in possibly applying for NSF funding, somebody I think asked about that when the deadline was, the first thing you always want to do is read that program solicitation and check it out. Our program officer always tells us, read it, and read it again. So you can find the solicitation on the homepage. AT Central acts as an information hub for the community. It's another one of our projects at Internet Scout, and it's a great place to learn more about who's doing work maybe in your state or in your area. There's a lot of mentoring in the community, a lot of support. You're always welcome to reach out to us at atcentral.net. The AT Impacts book and blog, the book comes out every 2 years. We are just about to publish another book. You can learn more about that. It highlights all of the big centers and a selection of the projects being funded. And it goes to everybody on the Hill and goes to lots of folks all over the country to help them understand the depth and breadth of the program, and then our newsletter too. So lots of good things you can sign up for and learn more about the community if you aren't as familiar with ATE.
Amazing. And of course, now when I hear read, I think read or listen to, that there are multiple ways that we can access all of these resources, which is so exciting. And just as a thank you for joining us in this webinar, as we always like to do, you can save 20% on all orders of this. This time we're offering 20% on all orders of UDL Now, a teacher's guide to applying UDL. This is the 3rd edition by Dr. Katie Novak, and this discount is available through May 31st. Just use the code ACCESS0522. So all caps ACCESS0522 during checkout. And there are some really exciting things going on at CAST. I work at CAST with Luis and Allison, and I learn from them all the time. So please feel free to join our CAST newsletter to really learn more about the research, the professional learning opportunities, and all the different projects at CAST. So visit our bit.ly/CAST-newsletter. And I again just want to thank the entire team for the support today. I want to thank our panelists for being here. And I want to thank you all for being here. Please take our survey. Let us know how the webinar is meeting your needs or not, how we can improve, and if there are any additional topics that you would like to hear and learn more about from CAST at this point. This webinar will be recorded. I know there were a couple questions about that. So in the next week or so, we'll make sure to get the recording out to you all so you can share it and watch it as often as you would like. So Rachel, Dan, Luis, and Allison, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you.
Great to see you all.
Make it a great day, everyone. Thank you.